when we were talking on the phone, I think the first question I'd like to ask you is, with Frank coming on in the second half, he's with the BEDC, an arm's length from the city of Burlington. You are directly with the town of Oakville. Is there an advantage or disadvantage with either of those two systems for economic development?
Well, I think it depends. Depends on the community, depends on the needs of the community. For Oakville, I think it works well to have us embedded into the corporate structure within Oakville. And there's a number of reasons. There's governance is different under both models, administration, finance, and I'd say service delivery. So in Oakville, it makes sense to have us part of the town, because so much of what we're doing is helping to facilitate new development coming into the community. So our involvement with the building, planning, engineering, roads departments is critical to expedite development applications and get things through all the approvals in a timely manner.
So do you cringe when your council is dealing with development charges and they look at increasing those development charges for the infrastructure? Are you looking at the impact on businesses?
Well, certainly. Actually, we report to council every year on our competitive position, and we look at the development charge rates, taxes, land values, which are three of those front-end costs for development across 29 municipalities. So when you look at those factors in Oakville, we're still competitively positioned for, especially for office development, and we are seeing that development coming into the community.
So does your team actually go out and make calls, or are you, I don't want to say sitting back, because that connotates relaxing, and I don't mean it in that way, but do you wait for businesses to approach you, or do you actively go out to talk to businesses about the benefits of being in the town of Oakville?
Oh, we're talking to businesses all the time. So when you think about the core components of economic development, you have business attraction, which is a marketing effort, and right now we're developing a specific website for Invest Oakville. We are working regularly with developers, with the realtor community in the GTA, as well as provincial and federal reps. So those all bring together leads into the community, and often they'll come in that way. Sometimes they come in directly to us from a company that's looking to locate. The other component of economic development is business retention and expansion. And surprisingly, a lot of the development that happens occurs from expansion of our existing companies. So we have a corporate calling program where we're regularly going out, meeting with companies and understanding where they are in that stage of development and providing assistance where we can. So
when you have a company that doesn't have the experience with Oakville, they aren't expanding, they aren't in Oakville, what are some of the most difficult challenges that you have introducing them to Oakville and getting them to set up business there? Is it taxes? Is it, I know everybody talks about the educated workers that Oakville has, which is a huge benefit. So I'm wondering what the real advantages of being in the town of Oakville are.
Well, there's a whole host of locational factors that go into a decision to locate. Cost is a critical one, as is labor. So we've got a competitive cost position in Oakville. We've got a great labor force that particularly around the professional scientific services. So we're an attractive location in that respect. I'd say the critical factor for most companies is time. So they often are looking at a decision. We've had a lot of consolidations that have come in from different locations. They're looking at a at a certain location, but they need to be in by a certain time. So whether we're working with the company directly or with the developer, there's a time factor. So can we get them through that development approval process in a timely manner?
And navigating that paperwork that obviously comes with a new business starting up.
That's correct. And when you think about residential development, our residential developers are very familiar with the approval process. For companies, particularly the ones who are trying to navigate that process on their own, they're focused on doing their own business. So the development approval process is new to them. So a little bit of hand-holding, helping them navigate through the different departments, really does provide some valuable assistance to them.
And that's where you find that being part of the municipality is really advantageous then.
Absolutely. So I can walk down the hall into our building department and talk about a problem or a critical issue, and there's someone there to address it right away.
Well, that'll be interesting in the second half when we learn Burlington adopted some time ago a different approach, a different model for how to deliver best on economic development. I've been listening and learning a lot, so I hope our viewers are getting a better sense of what you and your team do in the town of Oakville for economic development. My view, that's always a bit of a code word. That's a code word for jobs or more jobs, and building a tax base that's not residential and can afford and pay for a lot of the visions and really aspirations of a community. Question I have for you, because I think in Burlington we, like a lot of growing communities, have struggled at times as to how we define ourselves. If we believe that jobs and economic development is a key to the future, how are we doing? So I'm going to ask you, Town of Oakville, how have you performed? How do you measure what you've done in the last 10 years to get you where you are today? And then later I'm going to ask you about the future, but how have you done the last 10 years or so?
We've done very well. So I would say our primary target sector is professional financial services. And if you look at the landscape of Oakville and the number of offices popping up all along the QEW corridor, we've done very well. We've brought in companies, as I said earlier, through some consolidations, are directly here, Siemens, PwC, Canadian Tire Financial Services, all great, strong companies that wanted to be in Oakville. So we do measurement. We provide an annual report to council to look back at the objectives of our strategy that we developed in 2009 and see how we're progressing on an annual basis. We measure the square footage of office and industrial development that has been brought on stream. We look at the new jobs in the community, and there's surveys that are done by the town as well. So those are looking at business satisfaction. How are companies faring? We also bring companies together, whether sometimes on a larger scale with the Chamber of Commerce, and look at a discussion with business leaders to understand what are your challenges and how are we doing? Are there other things that we can do to provide assistance? And sometimes it's in smaller form. It's through our corporate calling program where we're speaking one-on-one with companies.
So you mentioned Canadian Tire Financial. Just on Burl Oak, the east side of Burl Oak, which puts them in Oakville. What would be the decision to be on the east side of Burl Oak rather than the west side of Burl Oak and in Burlington? What are the nitty-gritty differences that would allow Canadian Tire Financial to come to Oakville, as opposed to coming to another municipality?
Well, in Canadian Tire, a lot of what companies are doing these days in their site selection process is employee mapping. So Canadian Tire was an example of a consolidation. You're bringing employees in from the east and west, so you want a fairly centralized location amongst your existing locations. And Burl Oak fit that location. It provided a product that they were interested in. So if you look at the space there, there is parking for their employees, there are amenities close by, good access to the highway, good access to their labor force, and beautiful new buildings. So it was a very attractive location for them.
So is that where you work specifically with council in development of official plans so that you can place companies such as Canadian Tire Financial in an advantageous position there obviously has to be planning considerations and so on, and working so closely with those planners and so on. Does that give you a real advantage, not only being with the municipality, but having that input into things like official plans, which are so important to the businesses that are coming?
Well, you raise a good point, because the official plans are very important for the community and for employment growth. And one of the things that they do is it sets out the areas in which employment can locate or develop. One of the things that's undergoing, the process that's underway right now is an employment commercial land review. So that is a component of the official plan review, and that's looking at our existing employment areas and are the policies that are in place to guide that development, including height restrictions and so forth, do they still make sense? So those official plan reviews provide an opportunity for the town to adjust its policies and processes depending on changes in the market need.
Well, one of the things that's interesting, Burlington's undergoing its own review of official plan, and it'll be interesting when we talk to Frank McEwen about how Burlington's Economic Development Corporation can influence or advocate certain changes. But I wanted to ask you about it. You've talked about the successes, and visually, you're right, driving through the town of Oakville, you can see a lot of those. There are some, I'm sure, disappointments, some not within your control, like the Tim Hortons head office. There are some things where businesses grow or they're attracted someplace else.
What's wrong with the Tim Hortons head office?
Maybe she could explain.
Well, the Tim Hortons office is still in Oakville, but you've got an American Burger King.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I meant by out of control.
So
in other words, you can't control everything.
I thought you knew something about Tim Hortons.
Not at all.
I didn't know.
Now they make a fine coffee. But in terms of those things, some things are out of your control, and you can't, as you said, you report to council, and the city or the town will make its decisions. If I could give you a magic wand, looking ahead for the next 5 or so years, what would you absolutely see as a priority to make sure your economic development continues and does all the things you were talking about retaining and expanding and attracting? What's maybe the one item you see you can work on and improve to make sure economic development succeeds?
I got two requests on that magic wand.
Okay.
One is with the auto sector. So very important, our largest employer with Ford, Ford head office and assembly plant in Oakville. Mayor Burton has become the chair of an Auto Mayors Caucus across Ontario. That group is working with industry, with Unifor, with the Automotive Policy Research Center out of McMaster University, working together to support the automotive industry, to keep those jobs in Ontario. There's a lot of competitive pressures to bring those jobs into the southern U.S., into Mexico. And so one of my requests would be to keep a strong manufacturing base here. And the auto sector is one of them, but it's great for communities to be producing jobs as well as services. The second item on your magic wand is around innovation. So I think it's critical that Oakville continues to foster an environment for innovation, and we've got an exciting project that we're just exploring right now with the federal building downtown, federal former post office site. And while that's
a beautiful piece of land.
It is. It's a beautiful building, and while it's part of a larger term, it's a larger component of a larger project for the downtown cultural hub. While those plans are being developed, there's probably a 5-year window in which we can do something with that building. And the advantage of that is we want to bring people downtown and help create more of that activity in the downtown core, but it's an opportunity for us to engage the community, engage our great assets, the Sheridan College, and we've had some preliminary discussions with them. They're really keen to be bringing in engineering, thinking about engaging some of the schools in robotics and 3D printing, looking at Sheridan College's animation program, virtual reality. So there's cultural components that we can bring in. So providing that collision space where you can have the community coming out, right from young ages in schools to some of our retired engineers that want to participate. So we're just exploring those plans, and I think it's a great opportunity for us that we should continue to focus on providing that energy around innovation.
So when you mention number one with your magic wand, a lot of that has to do with federal government, provincial government, and what they're going to do for the auto manufacturing businesses to retain it here. Do you find that economic development, your economic development, is a municipal, regional, provincial, federal, or a little bit of all of them?
Well, I'd say we're primarily municipal. We're on the grounds. We're at the level where we're dealing with companies on the ground. So we're dealing with the companies in our community. We're attracting the companies here and helping facilitate their entry.
But the big companies like Ford, for example, are very dependent on the Ontario government and the federal government.
Yes, and that's where we work with our federal and provincial partners. Why we brought together those mayors as a group, because they have a stronger voice and they have a unique voice as mayors of their communities, because collectively they can talk about the importance of those jobs to their communities. And there are a lot of jobs in the auto sector. And when you think about the multiplier effect, it's very important for them to be raising the flag that this is important to their communities. And that's, we've had a lot of success in that regard.
Well, one of the things I find interesting is particularly in Burlington, you hear a lot about making sure the governments are well aligned in terms of communicating and understanding. You want to do business in Canada, you want to do business in Ontario, and you want to do business in your local community. And if they're not in alignment or there are issues out of order, there's only so much you can control. So I wanted to ask you two questions, quick ones. The first one is, we've heard a lot about what you do, significant. How big is your team by numbers, head count?
4, including me.
So that's a pretty efficient, I would say business-like approach to making sure you can accomplish a lot with little. Would you like more? This is your opportunity to talk
Absolutely.
to. Okay.
We've got a lot on our plate, and I think we could do more with more resources, but we make the best with what we have right now.
The second question, a quick one. You've been looking ahead and a little bit of predicting and hopefulness. Tonight's wild card game, is it the Orioles or the Blue Jays? And our viewers, by the way, will see this in repeat, and they'll know if you were correct or not.
Jays, absolutely.
That's probably the right answer.
Okay, Dorothy, we really appreciate you bringing some clarity to the whole economic development for our viewers. Sometimes it gets a little complex, and I think you've made it a little more straightforward to the average person to know why an economic development is important in a municipality. So thank you very much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I hope you'll come back again.
I will, certainly.
Okay.
You'll be invited, so that's the good news.
Absolutely. And stay tuned. We'll be right back.